I'm married, I love my husband, and I still almost did it. Not in a hotel room. Not in some dramatic movie moment. In a parking lot. In his car. With the engine off and the windows fogging and my wedding ring still on my finger. Nothing happened. That's what I told myself for weeks. But that's a lie. Everything happened. I just didn't touch him. This is the part I've never said out loud. This is the part that still burns when I think about it. I can still feel the heat of his car on my skin. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are grocery days. I had the list. I had the reusable bags. I was doing exactly what I always do. My life at that point wasn't bad. It wasn't anything. It was beige. My husband and I had been married for 23 years. We still said, "I love you," before bed. We still split the bills and the chores and the silence. But somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being people. We'd become a system. Wake up, coffee, work, dinner, TV, bed, repeat, repeat, repeat. I didn't hate it. I just didn't feel it anymore. I was standing in the produce section, holding a bag of apples I didn't really want when I saw him. Daniel. My brain didn't register it at first. It was just a man reaching for oranges. Tall, dark jacket, wedding ring, and then he turned, and I felt it. That electric shock of recognition that starts in your chest and spreads everywhere. 26 years. It had been 26 years since I'd seen his face. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. And for 3 full seconds, we just stood there. Frozen. Like two people who'd been in a car accident together. And just realized they both survived. Anna? His voice. God, his voice was the same. I don't remember what I said. Something stupid. Something like, "Oh my God," or "I can't believe it." The kind of thing you say when your body is screaming. And your mouth is on autopilot. We talked. Right there between the apples and the lettuce. He told me he was back in town for work. Consulting. 3 months. Maybe longer. I told him I was still here. Still married. Still the same. That last part was a lie. He asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. Just to catch up. Just as old friends. I said yes before I could think about it. We exchanged numbers. He texted me that night. I was loading the dishwasher when my phone buzzed. "Really good to see you today." Felt like no time had passed. I stared at that message for 5 full minutes. My husband was in the living room watching the news. I could hear the distant hum of the anchor's voice. The clink of dishes in my hands. The absolute ordinary silence of my life. And I texted back. Same. Let's definitely get that coffee. I didn't tell my husband. Not because it was wrong. Just because it felt private. That's what I told myself. But that night, lying in bed with my husband asleep beside me, I replayed the conversation. The way Daniel had looked at me. The way my body had woken up the second I heard his voice. I hadn't felt that in so long. That pull. That awareness. That sense that I was a woman, not just a wife. And I hated that I was thinking about it. I hated that I wanted to think about it more. Episode 2. We met 4 days later. Not for coffee. That felt too public. Too bright. He texted me late afternoon. "I know this sounds weird, but do you want to just sit and talk?" I'm parked near the old plaza. No pressure. I should have said no. I should have said I was busy. I should have remembered that no pressure is always a lie. But I didn't. I told my husband I was meeting an old friend. Not a lie, technically. But not the truth either. I drove to the plaza. It was almost dark. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars near the back. His SUV was parked under a broken streetlight. Engine off. I pulled up next to him and sat there for a minute. My hands on the wheel. My heart pounding like I was 16. He knocked softly on my window. I rolled it down. "Come sit with me," he said. "It's cold out here." I got out. I got in his passenger seat. and the door closed behind me like a trap I'd walked into willingly. The car still smelled new. Leather and cologne and something else. Him. We talked. At first, it was safe. Work. Life. The years that had passed. He told me about his divorce. How it had been final for 2 years now. How he'd spent most of his 40s working too much and feeling too little. I told him my marriage was fine. That was the word I used. Fine. He looked at me, really looked at me, and he said, "You don't seem fine." I laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. "I'm not unhappy," I said. "I'm just not anything." He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. And then he said it. "I think about you sometimes." The air in the car changed. It got heavier, warmer. "I think about what would have happened if you'd chosen me," he said. His voice was quiet, careful, like he was diffusing a bomb. I should have said something light. Something that would have broken the moment. But I didn't. "I used to imagine it," I said. My voice barely a whisper. The other version. The one where I said yes to you instead. He didn't move, but I felt him shift closer. Not physically, emotionally. "Do you still?" he asked. I looked at him. His face was half in shadow. I could see the faint lines around his eyes. The gray at his temples. He was older now. We both were. But God, he still looked at me like I mattered. "Sometimes," I said. The silence after that was unbearable. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear his. The windows were starting to fog. His hand was on the console between us. Mine was in my lap. The space between them was maybe 6 inches. It felt like a canyon. It felt like nothing. "Anna," he said, and the way he said my name made something inside me crack open. I wanted him to touch me. I wanted to close that space. I wanted to feel something other than the endless fucking beige of my life. But I didn't move, and he didn't move. We just sat there, in his car, in the dark, almost touching, almost everything. Finally, I said, "I should go." My voice shook. He nodded. "Yeah, you should." But neither of us moved for another 30 seconds. When I finally opened the door, the cold air hit me like a slap. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. And I knew this was the moment everything could still be stopped. I knew if I drove away and never answered another text, I could pretend this didn't happen. But I also knew I didn't want to stop. We met again 5 days later. This time, there was no pretending it was innocent. He texted me at 9 p.m. Same place. "If you want." I waited 10 minutes before I answered. Like that would make it less deliberate. Like that would make it less real. "Okay." I told my husband I needed to drive. That I couldn't sleep. That I just needed to clear my head. He barely looked up from his phone. "Be safe," he said. I drove to the parking lot. Daniel was already there. Same spot. Engine off. I got in his car without hesitating this time. "You came," he said. "I came," I said. We sat in silence for a minute. And then he said it. The thing I'd been waiting for him to say. The thing I'd been terrified he'd say. "You can't come back from this if we keep going." I looked at him. "I know. I'm not talking about sex," he said. "I'm talking about this. Right here. This feeling. Once you cross this line, you can't pretend you didn't." I swallowed hard. "What line?" He smiled. "Sad. Tired. The one where you admit you want something your life isn't giving you." I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Not because I was sad. Because he was right. "I feel more awake sitting in this car with you for 1 hour," I said, "than I've felt in my own kitchen for the last 5 years." He closed his eyes, like it hurt to hear. "Then leave," he said. I stared at him. "What? Leave him? If it's that bad? If you're that unhappy? Leave." I opened my mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "It's not that bad," I said finally. And I hated how small my voice sounded. "Then what are you doing here?" he asked. Not cruel. just honest. I didn't have an answer. He reached out then, slowly. His hand hovered over mine. And I felt it. That pull. That gravity. If I moved my hand 1 inch, we would touch. And if we touched, I didn't know if I could stop. I looked at his hand. At the space between us. At the wedding ring still on my finger. And I pulled back. Not because I was scared. But because I finally understood. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about my marriage. It was about me. About the part of me I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it existed. The part that wanted, that felt, that was still alive under all the beige. I can't do this, I whispered. He nodded. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said. You don't owe me anything. I looked at him one last time. Memorizing his face. The way he looked at me. The way he made me feel seen. Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye, Anna. I got out of the car. He didn't follow me. He didn't text me. He just let me go. I stood in the parking lot under the broken streetlight. Shaking. Crying. Alive. And then I drove home. I didn't tell my husband. Not then. Not ever. Some people would say that's the same as cheating. Maybe they're right. But I didn't cheat. I didn't kiss him. I didn't touch him. I didn't cross the physical line. But I crossed another one. The one inside myself. The one I didn't even know was there. For weeks after that night, I moved through my life like a ghost. I cooked dinner. I did laundry. I smiled at my husband when he told me about his day. But inside, I was different. I'd felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Desire. Not just for another man. But for myself. For the version of me that still wanted things. That still felt things. That was still a woman, not just a wife. And that terrified me. Because once you know that part of you is still alive, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to sleepwalking. I started paying attention. To my husband. To our life. To the ways we'd stopped being people and started being a routine. And I realized something. Being a good wife and being alive in my own skin had become two different things. And I didn't know how to be both anymore. So I started small. I started saying what I wanted for dinner instead of asking what he wanted. I started reading again. I started going for walks alone just because I wanted to. I started taking up space in my own life. My husband noticed. You seem different, he said one night. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Is that okay? I asked. He smiled. Yeah, it's good. I missed you. And I realized he'd been sleepwalking too. We didn't fix everything. We didn't fall madly back in love. But we started being people again. Together. I still think about that night sometimes. About Daniel. About the heat of his car. And the space between our hands and the line I almost crossed. And I'm not proud. But I'm not ashamed either. Because that night taught me something. It taught me that being human is dangerous. That wanting is dangerous. That feeling anything real is a risk. But numbness is worse. I didn't cheat. But I can't say I stayed loyal. I stayed. There's a difference.